very first AIDS cases were 5 gay men diagnosed in Los Angeles in 1981 by a doctor named Michael Gottlieb. And what linked them was that they were all in what was called the fast lane gay lifestyle. They were doing a lot of recreational drugs. They were taking many different drugs at the same time, combining drugs much more than was the pattern for straight drug users. They also partied a lot. They went to bars, they went to clubs, they went to bathhouses. They met a lot of men. They had a lot of anonymous sexual contacts. And as a result, they were exposed to a lot of the classic sexually transmitted diseases like syphilis and gonorrhea. And because they were getting those diseases, they were also frequently going to doctors and getting antibiotic prescriptions to treat those. All of that created a situation where a handful of gay men were burning the candle at both ends and putting a blowtorch to the middle. And it's no wonder that after a while their immune systems started to collapse and they started getting sick in these unusual ways that previously had only been seen in older people whose immune systems had deteriorated from age.
I would watch my friends stay up all night at the baths doing speed and then take a downer, and then in the middle of the day in the afternoon they'd be under the covers twitching. I consciously tried to deal with drugs in a saner way than most of my friends did.
There was a ton of poppers. They were everywhere. You would walk into a gay bar, and on the dance floor, it was not unusual to see every probably third person holding a little bottle up to their nose, and you could just smell it everywhere.
Poppers is a slang term for amyl and butyl nitrite inhalants. Their legitimate medical function is as an emergency heart disease treatment, to give someone to dilate their blood vessels so they don't have a heart attack. What they were used for in the gay community is both the physiological effect of dilating the rectum so that receiving anal sex is easier and less painful, and also there was a tremendous psychological high about them. John Reschi, in his book The Sexual Outlaw, describes the effect of poppers in a crowded environment as the room exploded in sex. They became a mainstay of the gay social scene in the late 1970s, were commonly used by large numbers of people in gay clubs and in the bathhouses. And their risk is that they're actually chemically quite similar to drugs given when doctors want to suppress the immune system, i.e. to transplant patients. The chemistry is rather similar, so it's not at all surprising that people who took these drugs quite often would develop immune suppression.
So the drugs became something that you did together with a group of friends before going out. It became part of the way that our social lives were starting to be structured.
It was a blast. I remember living in Miami and flying to New York for parties at the Saint, and going. This was a club that was really set up for gay men, and you would arrive and the music would just be pulsating, and you'd go up in the balcony and just have all sorts of wild anonymous sex, and this is before rubbers and that sort of thing, and we'd formed this little subculture of where sex was, we took it on as like a recreation.
I was treated for gonorrhea, I bet 5 times, chlamydia maybe twice, syphilis once, anal warts, let's see, what else? Crabs, like you wouldn't believe. Those bathhouses had crabs.
Well, think about it. With gay men, the problem is even worse than with heterosexuals because of anal sex. the organisms that are spread through anal sex live outside the body for long periods of time. And if you've got everybody having 200 or so partners per year, what you created is a situation that's very similar to third world countries, where the water is contaminated by feces. And so we're having this in San Francisco and New York and many gay urban areas. We have third world-like conditions. Dysentery was endemic in San Francisco right before AIDS hit. There were epidemics of dysentery, both in San Francisco and New York.
I remember a number of friends talking a lot about diarrhea, just diarrhea all the time, and fevers, lots and lots of fevers.
A friend of mine who cut my hair and who I'd had sex with, and most of my friends had had sex with, got KS and died very suddenly. And that was immediately put into a context of other gay men dying in New York, and some articles coming out in the gay press describing that. And it seemed like the ones who died first all had some characteristics in common that I didn't share. And so I felt relatively safe. And I wasn't surprised, because I knew that we had been pushing things to the limit with our drug use and our sexuality.
I would hear about people dying a lot, that people were dying more and more, that it was an epidemic, that it was, spreading, that it was, that no one was immune, that it could get everybody, and that you could get sick, you could die from having one exposure. And, all this stuff, all these things that made me feel like there really was no way out.
It seemed like a period of time when I was going to a memorial once a month, a doctor, a priest, a school teacher. But the one common denominator was that, I did know that they were gay.
There's really no contradiction in holding certain groups in contempt, as gays are often horrifically in this culture, and at the same time wanting to read about the nasty things they do. This became big news. And this also was news that could affect everyone else. In other words, they were starting it. These gay men were starting something that came out of the box, and it could spread throughout the culture. Now, that was pushed on pretty strongly. Heterosexual AIDS became an issue that led to funding for AIDS research.
I remember reading in the Wall Street Journal in 1996 a May 1st front page article. I couldn't believe it. CDC officials were admitting that even as they were saying everyone's at risk for AIDS, they knew that wasn't true, but they also knew that if Americans realized that, they wouldn't support substantial AIDS funding.
What the journal didn't report was that this was a strategy that had actually been developed 10 years earlier by volunteers from the public relations industry, people with a lot of PR experience who were also gay, who figured that they could serve their community best by mounting a PR campaign, convincing Americans that everyone was or soon would be at risk for AIDS, so that there would be support for a massive program of government funding for this particular condition, far out of line in terms of funding per patient than what's being spent on cancer or heart disease or a lot of other diseases that kill far more people.